Hi, everybody. Today we have Roshan Gupta on the show. Roshan, thank you so much for agreeing to do the show. I am super excited. You are a founder at Amplify PM, and you started your career as a software engineer. You are MIT trained computer science and master's in computer science. You started your career as a software engineer. You did a few different roles at Oracle, and then you broke into a startup as a senior product manager. And I saw then you became a director of product, and then you went to Meta as a product manager working on ads. And then you actually got promoted to become a group product manager at Google, and you led 300 plus people there. I'm really, really excited to talk to you about your career journey and the core of what you teach, which is communication and persuasion for product leaders and anybody who's wanting to go into product. So welcome to the show. And my first question to you is, walk us through, how did you get into engineering and why did you get into engineering? And then how did you decide to go into product?
Yeah. So my love of engineering goes back to when I was a little kid, and I'm probably dating myself. The gray in my beard is probably dating myself, if I'm being honest. But back when there were floppy drives and they had the basic programming language, my parents were programmers. And so I would fiddle around with it, and I just sort of fell in love with building software. And so that carried through, and I went to MIT and I worked as a software engineer, and I loved it. But I think a lot of people start to, wonder, well, we're building this thing, but why are we building it? And so I had that same curiosity. I would work on what I thought were amazing products, but they wouldn't go anywhere. And so it just got me excited about product management. I love to learn about a lot of different things. And so I decided to try to break into product. It's not easy, all right? It's hard to go straight from college right into product. So pretty much everybody comes from somewhere else. And I actually had to move around a couple of different companies until I landed at a startup called TrialPay. And even there, they said, come in as an engineer and then we'll transition to product. So it took some time, but I eventually made my way into product, and that was 18 years ago. Haven't looked back, and I absolutely love it. You get to learn about so many different things, talk to so many different people, and it's just a really good fit for what I do.
Beautiful. So what did you have to learn at the core to get that product role?
So I think, the way I broke in was I asked the head of product, like, can you give me a small feature that I would do on the side? And so, I still do my day job, but I had to show that I was willing to go the extra mile and kind of dip my toe in the water. And when I was given that feature, it was the tiniest feature. I just spent as much time as I could to crush it. And so I think for me, it's just curiosity, a willingness to put yourself out there, a willingness to invest in yourself, invest in learning the craft, right? So many people talk about wanting to go into product and just wait for it to happen. But then there are the people who take action, right? They sign up for a course or they ask to, be a PM on something, even if it's additional work on top of their current job. And so that's what I basically needed. I needed curiosity. I needed that desire and determination to do it. And those are the same skills, honestly, that make you a great product manager. And so it helped me break into product, and it helped me succeed in product as well.
Amazing. Roshan, so the core of what you are doing is you're coaching people, communication skills and persuasion, right? Were you always good at communication and persuasion?
I was not actually. I would classify myself as an introvert. And so it's not something that came naturally to me. And honestly, it's one of the biggest reasons why I quit Google. I loved my team at Google. It was an amazing job. But I left it because this skill of communication is so essential to being a product manager, especially. Frankly, it's needed to be a leader, but to be a product manager and a product leader, it's absolutely critical. And it's one of those skills where you can learn the skill, but nobody really teaches it. And so I learned it by just taking an interest in it, watching other people who I admired and how they communicated, I joke around. I think I started building this muscle when I was a kid, and I would bug my mom for toys, and she would say no, and I would find 50 different ways to ask her. And so, I think all those experiences and then proactively seeking out ways to learn this skill is how I picked it up. But it very much is a learnable skill. And I now teach it, and it is a skill that is worth investing in and can really make a difference.
Yeah. Walk us through like what is the core framework for when you teach communication? What does that entail?
Yeah, so let's see. If I had to describe the three fundamentals of great storytelling, I would say I sum it up in a single sentence. You have to focus your audience on a compelling message that they can trust. And so it comes down to focus, compelling, and trust. And so focus is the number one mistake I see people make is they just try to say too much all at once. And so learning how to focus your audience on one takeaway is critical. Learning how to make it compelling. So we talk about persuasion, but persuasion is persuading someone of something. And often we over focus on the something and we don't focus on the someone. And so you have to make it compelling. The only thing more powerful than someone who has to listen to you is someone who wants to listen to you. And so learning how to make your message compelling to your target audience is a critical principle of great storytelling. And then trust, right? You can have two people pitch you the exact same thing, but if one of them is someone you trust, they deliver on time, they communicate well, and the other one is someone who misses deadlines or gives vague updates, it could be the exact same pitch, but that trust makes a difference. So I would say those are the three fundamentals of great storytelling. I also have a framework I use to help people, go from 0 to 1 when they're creating their pitch that I'm also happy to walk through as well.
Yeah. So what does that look like? Let's say someone has their first meeting with their stakeholder where they want to convince of them about a feature that they really believe they should build. What does that look like? Those three core things that you just communicated.
Yeah. So for example, let's talk about focus. An analogy I like to give is, imagine serving someone a glass of wine. I live in Portugal, so we have amazing wine over here. And so I like to use this as an example. But imagine you're serving someone an amazing glass of wine that they're going to love and they're going to appreciate, and it's going to transform them and it's going to get them excited. And then you pour a bottle of water into it and you basically dilute your message. And so that's what we often do. We'll have the one takeaway that we want our audience to leave with, but then we add in a whole bunch of other content because maybe we just are not sure who will be in the audience. We want to include everything, or maybe we just want to show that we know our stuff. But ultimately, we dilute our message. And so my first tip would be, I call the tool only one. So imagine that you're pitching this feature and your audience is going to be distracted. Your time might be cut in half. If everything fell apart and your audience could leave with only one takeaway, what would you want that takeaway to be? And whatever that is what you should build your entire pitch around. And so that's how I would put that focus into practice. For compelling, this is where you have to understand your audience. And if we think about it, when we use AI today, right? If you ask AI to do something and you don't give it context, vague generic input results in like vague generic output. And so we often forget, and for AI, we know this, we give it context. And if we give it the right amount of context, we get much better responses. So the same is true for how to make it compelling, right? We have to understand the context of our target audience. And so how can you do this? One simple way is just think about, what's your target audience's deepest desire and what's their deepest fear? Like what keeps them tossing and turning at 2 a.m. at night? And if you just understand those two things, it can make a huge difference if you tie your pitch to maybe fulfilling that deep desire or alleviating that deep fear. And so that's one way to put the compelling part of the framework into practice. For the trust, Trust is one of those things that it's built up over time. You're not going to build it in one single presentation. But there's the trust you build from delivering on time and meeting your commitments and all the stuff that we all know. But what people don't realize, and this is when you build a reputation for storytelling that puts you on a whole new trajectory, if you're a PM or wanting to even enter product management. But if every time someone gets in a room with you, your message is focused, it's clear, it's compelling, it shows that you respect their time, it shows that you have put in the effort to give them a clear story, and that builds trust. That builds trust in you as a speaker, and then that trust extends to your message. And so when it comes to trust, actually investing in communicating well, investing in making it focused and compelling, builds that third pillar of trust. And even just those three things alone will transform how you are persuasive, how you show up, and how you're perceived.
Beautiful. So now let's actually go to the fourth step. Let's say we do have this meeting coming up and we do have one only. One thing is to convince of the stakeholders of this one feature. Maybe you can give an example of that. We also, let's go through a journey of how do we research about our core target audience and their fears and their big desires. And we can also talk about the trust, but you have this beautiful framework.
Yes.
That it really resonated with me. So walk us through that.
Let's do it. So let me describe the 4-step framework, and then we're going to dig into step number 1, which that step alone will transform how people tell their stories. So, the analogy I like to give, the number one mistake I see PMs make when they're asked to pitch something is, and I'm guilty of this too, you open up a deck and you start making slides. We'll say, oh, let me put together a skeleton deck. And that's like a movie director pulling out a camera and just start filming scenes, right? It's gonna result in a flop. And so what do movie directors do? Well, they don't start filming, they start with the script. And actually, before the script, they start with something that's called a script outline. And the script outline lists the target audience, what emotions they should feel, the key plot points that lead them to that big, climax at the end. And so that's the script outline that they'll start with first. And then from the script outline, they'll make a script. And the more thought and care they put into that script outline, the better that script. And once they have the script, then yes, they can film the movie. Even then, they're not done, because now you have a great movie with a great script. But if you play it in a theater and the lights are not dim enough, or the volume's too loud, or the popcorn's stale, it's not going to be a great experience. And so there's how you create the content, and then there's also how you deliver the content. And so that's the 4 steps that a movie director goes through to make a compelling story. Script outline, then they write a script, then they film the movie, and they try their best to control the theater experience. So my framework is the same 4 steps, but for PMs making pitches. So like a script outline, I teach something called a story map. And it's how you analyze your audience, understand how you want them to change, understand what would get them to change, and all the evidence and support you would give them. Once you make the story map, then I teach how do you turn that into your narrative, right? And if we think about a script, you have to grab people's attention and you have to keep people's attention throughout the movie. If the movie jumps around and people can't follow it, it doesn't work. And so there's an art to taking that story map and turning it into a narrative that flows and grabs your audience's attention. The third step is often for us, it's creating a deck, right? Which is the equivalent of filming a movie. But even here, there's an art and science to it. Because if you're a movie director and you're filming all your scenes as close-ups or they're poorly lit, it's still going to flop. And so in my framework, I teach you how to make decks and slides that support your message. And then the last one is how do you deliver that content, like the theater experience? So how do you control the room? How do you control the pace? How do you handle questions that come in that you don't know the answer to? So those are the 4 steps of the framework that I teach. that will help you go from 0 to 1 and create compelling pitches, from start to finish every time. So I can jump into the story map if that's interesting.
Yeah. Yes, that's interesting. And Roshan, if you could kind of give us like an example of somebody who you coached and what kind of meeting that they had, and what was the process of how they wrote the story map for somebody who's really new to the framework, right? How do you really research the story map up? What do you actually do? Do you take a pen and paper? You think? So kind of make us real with a personal example or somebody that you've coached.
Yeah. Well, so let me give an example. So let's talk about the story map. So the first thing is you have to identify who your audience is. And so a hypothetical example is you are a PM of a growth team and you want to hire 5 engineers. You want to grow your team by 5 engineers. So you need to make this pitch. And so the first thing is you have to identify like who is your audience and then what makes them tick. So for example, your audience could be the VP of product, right? And then you have to analyze what makes them tick. So for example, what's their deepest desire? Maybe that VP of product has personally championed a specific new product and they deeply, deeply, deeply want that product to succeed. Or you might need to convince, let's say, the head of HR. And the head of HR, their deep fear is if we don't increase revenue, I'm gonna have to have layoffs. So that might be a deep fear of that target audience. And so that's an example of you have a pitch, you want to grow your team by 5 engineers, but you got to think of who are you pitching and what drives them. And just by thinking of their deep desires and their deep fears, you can get pretty good context on who they are. So now let's move on to the second step. Okay, great. You know your target audience. What do you want to have happen after they walk out of that room? After you pitch them for an hour, they walk out of that room. What is that one takeaway that you want them to have? And so maybe for the VP of product, it's I want that VP of product to approve my headcount. Maybe for the head of HR, that's too much, right? Maybe he or she is so worried about adding more cost to the bottom line by hiring people that actually the transformation you seek is I just want the head of HR to talk to the VP of product about this idea. And so that's the second step of that story map. Identify your audience and then understand how you want to transform them. And again, that can change based on your audience. Third step I would take in this hypothetical example is say, okay, well, now I know how I want them to change, but why would they want to change? So for example, with the VP of product, if I just said, hey, I would like approval for 5 new engineers, that's what I want the VP of product to do, but I have to tie it to something that matters to them. And that's where that first step comes in, that audience analysis. I know that VP of product is deeply, deeply invested in the product that they specifically champion. So imagine I frame my story as these 5 engineers, half the experiments that they're going to run in the next year are actually going to be on your product, Mr. VP. And so that's an idea of starting to use that audience analysis and tailoring your message. If I think of that head of HR, right, and he is, very worried about revenue going down or not growing enough and having to lay off people. The pitch might be, actually, these 5 new engineers, all the experiments they run are 100% revenue generating. Like that's their whole focus is revenue generating experiments. And so that is tailoring the pitch to alleviate a deep fear that they have. And an example of using this story map to hone your pitch. The last thing that you do in the story map is, well, what evidence do you have? So if I'm the head of HR, what evidence do you have that they'll actually generate revenue? So show me projections, show me, case studies that you've done. If I'm the VP of product, okay, well, give me an example of the kind of experiments you'll run on my product. So hopefully that gives your audience a concrete example of how to take that first step of my 4-step framework, the story map, and how to make it practical. Analyze your audience, like what are their deep desires and their deep fears. Figure out how you want them to transform at the end of your pitch. Connect what they deeply desire or deeply fear to the transformation you seek, and then give them the evidence that they need to support that conclusion.
Beautiful, beautiful. Where does answering the frequently asked question, where does that fit in?
Yes. So one of the things is we talked about trust, right? So you have to focus your audience on a compelling message that they can trust. And so trust, when you pitch to executives or when you pitch to leadership, they're busy, right? They're swamped with things. And so the truth is executives and leaders operate on trust. They'll ask for details, but really once they trust that your thinking is right and your judgment is right, they'll skip the details. And so one of the ways you can build trust is during the story map planning, think of all the questions that they might ask. So think of all the questions that VP of product might ask, right? Like, what would those 5 engineers do? Do they need to be junior? Do they need to be senior? Could you do it with 3 engineers? What if I gave you more engineers? And so brainstorm all of the things that could come up. And what you're really doing is something called objection handling. And it's a common tool in sales. And if you anticipate what they might ask, then during that presentation, if those questions come up and you show that you're prepared, that trust in you skyrockets. And you can even create some magic moments if you just put all these questions in a slide in the appendix. Imagine if a leader asks you a question and you jump to the appendix and you highlight the question and say, I thought you might ask that. Imagine, the amount of trust in your thinking that grows from there. And so that's an example of, brainstorming all the questions that might come up and using it to build that trust in you as a speaker and in your message.
Beautiful. So I want to pick one more quick example. A lot of the folks who are listening here, they either are interviewing or they're thinking about interviewing, or an interview is coming up where, they would have to face a panel where they are literally going to be judged on their communication skills, their persuasion. And it's also whoever has the best skills, best experience. It's also competition, right? So this is on everybody's top of mind. So how can we use this same framework? What components of this is relevant for a panel interview where a VP of product, an engineering manager, a tech lead, and an engineer are there, and someone is interviewing for a product role?
Yeah, for sure. So the beauty of this is, that story map is really about framing your message to be focused and compelling, whether that's a presentation, whether that ultimately is an email, whether you're trying to make a case for yourself in an interview. It's the same fundamentals that will help you in all those situations. So if we look at an interview, right, what's the one takeaway that you want them to leave with? It can be more than one, but the problem is we'll often walk in there and we think that the answer is to show them everything we possibly know so that they think we're smart and they think we have the skills and we're capable and we get hired. But it's overwhelming to get all that information. And so think about focus when you're preparing for the interview. If they could only walk away with 1 or 2 things, what would you want that to be? And make sure that the answers that you're giving are boosting that signal. The compelling piece, right? So they're hiring because they have jobs that need to get done, right? They have a gap in their company or a goal that they're trying to achieve. And ultimately, they're interviewing you to solve that thing that matters to them or the company that they work for. And so think about ahead of time, what are they trying to accomplish with this role? And this is a great time for you to talk to the recruiter or even the person you're interviewing. If you have their information, you can ask them ahead of time. But find out what it is that excites them about someone coming in and filling this role. And then think about how to tailor what you do to show that you will deliver on that compelling experience. So that's another example. Let me give one more that I think will be helpful and that a lot of people don't do in interviews. So I interview PMs all the time at Google and at the companies I work for. And we were trained not to look for the right answer. We were trained to find the signal we need to make a high confidence decision. And if I asked a question and someone wasn't doing a good job answering it, I would just stop and ask a different question. So my goal was to get enough signal or proof that the signal wasn't there, not to just get a right answer. And so if we flip this around, right, the goal of being persuasive is not getting your message out, it's getting your message across. And so one way to do that is to pause during your interviews and say, did I give you the signal that you're looking for? Or did that answer your question? Can I add any more details? And that's something that a lot of people don't do during interviews because they feel like they need to walk in and be confident and have all the answers. But remember, your goal is to give them the signal that they need to make a high confidence decision. Don't be afraid to stop and ask them if you can give them different signal.
Yeah.
And so that's my third tip.
Beautiful. Roshan, I'm just curious. I want to double click on like the signal, right? So this is obviously, probably product manager or engineering role at Google, which is very competitive. So what were some of those signals that you were looking for?
Yeah. So, if you go out there and you research, how to crack the PM interview, there's a lot of information out there in terms of the types of things that most of these companies look for. So, for example, analytical thinking, right? Or product sense, or I would do a lot of the like behavioral and leadership type of things. So there's a lot of information out there. And so I want to give you sort of more insider information. And so the insider information is when I interview people, even if they gave me the right answer, I would push back and challenge them. Because what I was really looking for was not just their analytical thinking, but how did they defend that thinking? How did they respond when challenged? Did they bristle? Did they immediately change their mind? Did they get curious, as an example? And so these meta signals were often more important than the signals I was, that they say that you're looking for. Analytical thinking, man, I hated these interviews. I think I was asked, when I interviewed for Google, how many bicycles does Google need to provide on campus for all of its employees? I have no idea. And those would intimidate the heck out of me.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. What they're really testing for is how do you take something ambiguous and how do you start to make it tractable? And that's the signal they're looking for. They don't actually care if you get the right answer. And so one of the ways I would deal with this is I would ignore the numbers and I would just talk about the logic. Okay, well, let's say it's the California Mountain View campus. And let's say there's, 10 buildings and there's every meeting is an hour. So there's 8 meetings in a day. And let's assume that X% of those meetings will be in a different building. And I would just use variables and I would ignore all the numbers and I would just show the logic. But what I was really doing was showing that I was starting to think about this methodically. And at the end, I plugged in numbers and I think my numbers are way off, but it didn't matter because I gave them the signal they want. They don't care if you can estimate the number of bicycles. They care, how do you deal with ambiguity? And so again, read all the stuff out there about how to prep for interviews, but then think about the signal behind it. Like what actually are they testing for to see that that person is going to crush it once they're in the room?
Yeah. Beautiful. And tying this to, going back to, let's say if this is a APM, like associate product manager or product owner who's going for their first role, what I'm collecting is, I would really do my research around what the company is, who the hiring managers are. I would talk to the recruiter, like, is this a new role in a new team or is this somebody left the company and they're having somebody join? How urgently they're looking to hire? What is the core product? I would actually go to their job site and look at what kind of roles are they posting for a developer, like what kind of products they're developing. And I would just really research around who is all coming into the call and, just simulate in my mind, okay, these stakeholders, these people who are coming in, this is probably the thing that they're really desiring, and these are probably the signals that they're looking to hire for. And this is their desire and this is a pain. So I would, as a new product person, my thing would be, I am the right fit for the role to do this job based on my understanding, and I could be wrong, but I am very hungry. I've actually done all my research. I align with the value of the team. So you're saying I could do all this and create a nice map, and I can build a story based on the hypothesis, based on my story map.
I'll give you an example. Because again, when we take the pressure off of us to show product experience and focus on what really matters, which is the skills that are needed to crush it as a product manager, it opens up the narrative that we can tell. So if you're a business analyst, you might say, well, shoot, I want to be a product manager, but I don't have product manager in my resume, so I don't think I can get a role. It's going to be hard, and you hesitate. But if you're a business analyst who, for example, had to work with a whole number of different stakeholders, or maybe you're in a consulting company and you worked with 10 or 15 different customers, well, what are you doing? You're jumping into a brand new situation. You're ramping up really fast on new context. You're making connections. And then you're coming out with a recommendation or an analysis that you're then persuading them to adopt to make a positive change. That's all of the things that product people do. You may not have had the product label, but you're doing product management. And product management is pretty broad. You kind of have to know a little bit about everything. So everyone out there who's trying to break into product, think about what you do on a daily basis and how that exhibits the skills that are needed. So communication is one of the most important, if not the most important skill in my mind for a product manager. But think about the ways that you communicate now with customers, with people on your team, and bring that story to the forefront. And again, that makes it compelling for the person on the other side of the table, right? They want to hire someone who's going to crush it in the role. They don't want to hire someone who 6 months in, finally everyone realizes is not the right fit, and then it takes another year to get them out. So they want that signal that this person's going to crush it, and you can give them that signal, and it can come from anywhere. You don't have to have the word product in your resume to break it.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. One last question that I have is in this topic is, so we have a storyboard, we do all of our due diligence, we create this beautiful map, our compelling story, we exactly understand who are the target audience, who are the key decision maker,
That's
what
right.
their fears are, and we think about frequently asked question, what they might say, and then the delivery day comes, right? So you're there. From just doing a lot of the research relevant to the stakeholder, people coming in, we've already done a lot of the work.
That's right.
What are other things that you've done
Yes.
that has helped you gain the trust despite of maybe not having all the signals or the things that the role is requiring you to have?
Yeah, I love it. It's a great question. So let me share two things, and then I'm going to reveal the secret to cracking the PM interview and the secret to crushing your pitches. So that's a little teaser for everyone, which, by the way, is one of the techniques I teach in my course. But let me start with the two techniques. The very first one, you've done the work, you have the research, you have your pitch, is find your why. And so it's human nature to mimic the emotions and the feelings of the person in front of you, right? So if you're happy and smiling, the person in front of you will smile. If you're laughing, they'll laugh. If you're sad, they'll be sad. It's biology. And so you can take advantage of this fact by finding your connection to the pitch, right? How many of us have pitched something that we're super excited about versus pitched something that we felt like we had to? There's a difference in energy. And so what I tell my students is there's always some reason to be excited about what you're pitching. Even if it's just, I want to get visibility for my team because they worked hard and they deserve it. And so that's my first tip, is find your why. My second tip would be, don't be afraid to say when you don't have an answer. And so one of the challenges is we go into the room and we feel like we have to project this all-knowing persona. And the truth is, it's not relatable, it's not true, and it makes us less, connected to the people in front of us. And so when you go in and you've done the prep and a question comes that you don't know, it's okay to be like, that's a great question. I want to think about that for a little bit. Can I get back to you? And that goes over better than trying to answer it or spending the entire time leading up to your pitch worried about what if that happens. So this is me giving everybody permission. It's okay if you don't know something. Now, if you walk in there and you don't know something all the time, every time, or you don't know the same thing twice, that's a problem. But if you've done the preparation and there's something you don't know, it's okay. And so those would be my 2 tips. One is find your deep connection to your own story. And 2, take the pressure off. If you've done the prep, it's okay if you don't know. You can come back and, fight the battle again. So the secret now to cracking the interview and the secret to killer pitches, people might not like this, but there is no secret. The secret is the prep. And everything, you just described about the prep that you would recommend people do, look at the stakeholders, look at the company, look at the role. Like that's actually the difference between the people who succeed and don't. If you're on LinkedIn and you see all these people saying, I got my PM job or whatever, don't let that fool you. There's a lot of work that goes behind it. When I pitch, even for this podcast, right? I've done this so many times. I've probably spent an hour or 2, prepping and going over the same material. And so I'm saying that because like, that's what it takes. It takes the prep and the repetitions. But here's what's amazing. It means you don't have to have a natural born skill. So if you're willing to put in the reps and practice and iterate, like that's it. Like that's the secret to success. And so being super persuasive is putting in that work, thinking of your story map, thinking of your audience. If you do that, you'll build a reputation, by the way. And people, every time you walk in a room, they're like, well, he's going to be compelling. He's going to be focused. Like I'm excited to listen because this is always a great use of my time. It gets easier and easier, but that is the secret. It's the prep, it's the reps. And if you're willing to do it, that's your moat. That's your unfair advantage.
Yeah, beautiful. My other question is, when you are speaking, this is almost so inspiring. Like you just give a very calm energy. And as a result of this is the most calmest podcast that I've ever had. So what you said about transferring energy, like that works. You being calm, collected, it has this effect on me.
Yeah.
So big question for people is, how do I not get nervous and how do I show up maybe a little excited? So did you always have the skill? How did you get it?
Yeah. It's what I teach in my course is how to do the prep in a way that, number one, when you walk in, you feel confident in the story you're about to tell. So that preparation goes a long way to removing the nerves. That's one. The second one is I absolutely love helping people. It's why I left an amazing team at Google to do this full time. Like I love it. And so my passion, I found my why, which is creating light bulb moments for people. But that passion is what is coming through. And it's a live example of what I mean by that, right? If someone feels energetic and excited about what they're teaching and the fact that they're helping people, like it comes across. And so that's an example there. I had a third one. I lost my train of thought there. What was my first one?
Yeah. I think, one thing I'm curious is, because sometimes, there's just not enough time, right?
Yes.
Sometimes you just, have this thing coming up and you're really busy, you have kids, there's so many things going on.
Yes.
And then you have like 2 hours, 3 hours to prepare, right? But
that's right.
What can you still do to best, show up with the energy that really helps you to build trust?
That's right. We were talking about energy and how to get over nerves. Real quick, my third tip is it's okay to be nervous and say to yourself, yeah, I'm nervous. This is important to me. This means something to me and I'm nervous and that's okay. And so often taking that pressure off can help you deal with nerves. But if you walk in still feeling nervous, it's 100% okay. I've given my class like so many times and every time I'm still a little bit nervous when I go in. It's the same thing, I'll hear people talk about imposter syndrome. I have an amazing career. I have imposter syndrome. Like we have to normalize these things. So it's okay to be nervous and normalize it and be okay. And then move forward anyways, right? So if you're short on time, one of the things that I do in my course on day 2 is I do live group coaching. And so people will come and bring a pitch and we'll apply the story map, that first step of my framework, in real time. And in 15 to 20 minutes, we completely transform the pitch. And so once you learn how to do this, it doesn't actually have to take a lot of time. And the way I kind of talk about it is it's like user research, right? Any user research you do is better than no user research, and it will make a difference. And so any of the prep that you do is better than no prep, and it will make a difference. If you have 30 minutes to think about what's the one thing, if I could get across today that I want to get across, that alone can make a huge difference. If it's what's the one thing I want to get across and what is something that I know really drives this person, again, you could do that in 30 minutes. If it's, and what are the top 3 questions I think they might ask? Boom. That's already a lightweight version of that story map that lets you walk in within 30 minutes and be much more prepared than if you had not done that. And so that would be my answer is accept the nerves. It's okay. Find your passion and your connection to the story. Apply that story map, even in a lightweight way, and then walk in knowing that you've prepped and that you can deliver your story, get feedback, iterate, and come back again.
Beautiful. What are some few communications habits as we're wrapping up? What are some habits somebody can practice over the next 30 days?
Yeah. So I'm going to give 3 things what people could try, and then a 4th one that is a bit unconventional. The first one is if you had time to do one thing, the next time you have to give a pitch or send an email, think about the only one tool. If I could only get one major point across, what would that be? It forces you to focus. It forces you to pour a glass of wine and not a glass of watered down wine. So practice that skill of what's the one thing that I have to get across. If you have more time, then bring in the who is my audience? What drives them? What keeps them up at 2 a.m. at night? And just doing that a little bit can make a big difference. And I think people will see that difference right away. The third thing, if you want to try 3 things in the next 30 days, is think about the top 5, 10 questions that might come up about what you're asking. That not only helps calm your nerves because you've thought of things, but if that question comes up and you feel prepared for it, it builds that trust in you. And that trust is extremely powerful. So those are the 3 things that you could try. 1, you could try 2, you could try all 3. The unconventional thing is interestingly one of the best communication coaches that we have that we didn't have before. And if you think about it, like AI is a reflection of our communication. So if you give it vague input, you get vague output. If you don't give it context, you get generic answers back. If you ask for too many things, then you don't really get a clear delivery on probably any of the things that you're asking for. Even, how many of us have learned to frame our prompts by saying, you're the world's best business analyst, and now here's what I want you to do, right? That's an example of framing your message to make it land better and get better results. And in the past, if you wrote an email to a VP, it might take weeks or months before you get feedback on whether that actually was the right thing. With AI, if you give it a bad prompt, you get an instant feedback on whether you communicated it well. So my unconventional thing is the next time you're communicating to AI, try reframing your prompt 10 different ways and see how that works out. Study the prompts that give you the answers you want and understand what was it that made it clear to the AI on what they need to deliver. And so that would be my 4th tip is think of AI as a communication coach and understand if you get what you want, what did you say correctly? And if you didn't get what you want, what could you have said to make it clear? And that will help you become a better communicator.
Beautiful. My last question for you, and this is the demo of the framework that you just talked about. I want to know what is your Maven course?
Yeah.
What happens in the course? Why should people get excited?
Yeah. So, why people should get excited, honestly, like being a communicator and being persuasive is going to supercharge your PM career. Because first of all, it's fundamental to what we do as PMs, right? We have to translate between all these different parties, and everyone knows we have to lead by influence and not by authority. And so this skill is foundational to getting into PM and to crushing it as a PM. The second reason why this is important, it's how you actually grow in your PM career. This is how you get the unfair advantage. Because think about it. If you're a PM and your scope doubled or tripled or quadrupled, right? You can't meet with everybody one-on-one to direct what they do. Like you have to be able to rally large groups of people to action just by the strength of your message. And so if you want to grow in your career, learning how to be influential and persuasive and clear in your communication is an absolute prerequisite. And so why should people get excited? I love Google to teach this because this is the thing. You absolutely need this skill to advance, but nobody teaches it. And so there are so many PMs who I work with or who work for me who are great, and I couldn't promote them because they didn't have the skill. But then what happens is it's like, build your executive presence and good luck with that. And nobody tells you how. And that's what frustrated me because you can learn the skill. I wasn't good at this. I learned the skill. And so this course is, if you want to learn this skill and you want to take advantage of the embarrassing number of hours I put into this course to make it straightforward and simple and effective, like this is the course for you. You can learn it over time, but if you want to speed up this entire process, and if you're early in your PM career or you're just breaking into PM, man, if you learn this skill now, you're shifting your entire trajectory upwards. So that's why I think people should be excited. My Maven course, it's a 4-day course. It's live. People ask questions. We interact with all the people in the cohort. There are projects and group coaching where you get real-time feedback. It includes a one-on-one session with me because I'm very determined to make you a persuasive storyteller. So we will meet after the course. It includes for a year afterwards, reinforcement emails to remind you of what you learned. Because ultimately, I want to transform you. I want to get you to that persuasive storyteller reputation that I know will change your career. So that's why I hope people get excited about this. I recommend people check out the reviews, right? I can talk about all the things that I think are great, but it's better to hear from other people. So check out the reviews. But I would love to see more folks invest in this really important skill.
Beautiful. I want to be in this class.
Awesome.
And thank you so much for articulating this. And this it in itself was a nice mini masterclass on persuasion and communication. So Roshan, thank you so much for your time and your energy and teaching us about communication and persuasion.
And you're welcome. And thank you for introducing me to your audience. And I hope I've helped some people.
Absolutely.